Hey, Fitheads. Today we talk with Dr. Glenn Livingston, a psychologist. He formerly worked in the big food industry, and this one was so cool. I'm so glad we had him as our inaugural 2022 episode. Oh my goodness.
He's the author of Never Binge Again, which is, I think, I don't know if it's your New Year's resolution, but it's mine every year.
Every year.
I mean, it was awesome. He talked about so many things that I think you and I sort of casually, anecdotally think or guess about ourselves. And he had the studies and the facts and the data to back it up, but he presents everything in a way I love.
Yeah, but he also reframed stuff in a way that was never something that I'd have thought about, like that when he talked about character versus willpower. Mm-hmm. The idea of making good decisions is who you are versus, I have to decide to be good right now.
Yeah, that was such an awesome start for us because we talked about decision fatigue. We were like, I don't want to make the right choice every day. I want to have a system or procedure in place that I don't have to make the decision so I won't get tired. And he was like, well, but it's more than that. Every decision you make is a choice to be that type of person. So if you're like, I don't know if I want to go to the gym today, every time you sort of overcome that or whatever, however you get it, you're making the decision to be that kind of person. Mm-hmm. And then after a while, you're just a person who goes to the gym. You're a gym rat. I don't know. It's such an awesome way. I mean, you want to talk about new year, new me. That's exactly what that is. You know what I mean? It was awesome.
Totally.
Welcome to Total Fitheads.
Serious fitness for not so serious people.
Welcome, Dr. Livingston. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, please call me Glenn. I've been looking forward to talking to you guys all week long.
All right. We're already buddies with Glenn. Love it.
Anybody that calls themselves fitheads are good friends of mine.
Well, everyone listening considers themselves that. Yeah. So give them an intro. Give the fitheads an intro about you and a little bit about your background.
Well, I guess the most important thing I want you to know is that I'm not just a doctor who works with overweight people. I used to be a lot heavier myself. And if you've been to the Woodbury Country Deli in Syosset, Long Island in the 90s or early 2000s, and you found that they were out of pizza or Pop-Tarts or Oreos, there's a pretty good chance I was there before you. So I struggled with food most of my life. I was actually really into fitness when I was a kid, and I discovered if I could work out for 2 or 3 hours a day, that I could eat anything I wanted to, like multiple pizzas, boxes of donuts, boxes of muffins, half a dozen lattes, chocolate bars, anything that wasn't nailed down. I was good for that. And I kind of made myself into this eating and working out machine, which was okay for me at the time because I'm 6'4", I'm got a decent physique just naturally, and I got away with it. Except it was a real waste of time. And it became a problem when I got a little older and I was married and I was commuting 2 hours each way to see patients and finish my PhD. And I'd come home and my ex-wife would, God forbid, want to talk to me. Then I just didn't have the time to work out like that at all. Maybe an hour a week, maybe a half hour a week. It was crazy. But I found that the food still had a hold of me. It's like it had a life of its own. And I didn't gain a lot of weight right away. I gained a little weight, but not a lot of weight right away. What happened was I was obsessing about it. So I'd be working with a suicidal patient and thinking, when can I get to the deli and dislodge my jaw and empty the tray into it? Or with a couple right after an affair, and I couldn't be 100% present. And it's really important to me because I've always thought of myself as a psychologist first and foremost. I've done a lot in business, but I grew up in a family of 17 psychotherapists, and it's all I ever wanted to do. Yeah, she's laughing. If something breaks in the house, we all know how to ask it how it feels, and nobody knows how to fix it. And that's it's a joke, but it's also true. So it was really disturbing to me, because being a good psychologist is not so much about a jigsaw puzzle. Like, people have this imagination that you sit and you figure out what the problem is in the client's life, and you say, we'll just rotate this piece over here and this piece over here, and they'll say, thanks, doc, I'll get right on that. But it just doesn't work like that. You got to lend them your soul. You got to be there. You got to be there with them so that they love and trust you enough to think new thoughts and leave their comfort zone. And it's not an endeavor you can be obsessing about pizza with while you're doing it. And thank God I never lost a patient. And I saw hundreds of couples, and only 2 of them ever got divorced. But bothered me, really bothered me. And I, coming from the family that I came from, took a typical depth psychology approach. I figured, well, I must have a hole in my heart, metaphorically speaking. And if I could fill that hole in my heart, then I won't have to keep filling that hole in my stomach. And so I tried to love myself thin. And I went to the best psychologists and psychiatrists in the area, and I poured out my heart and soul, and I went to Overeaters Anonymous, and I had a spiritual awakening and all that kind of thing. And I would get a little better and a lot worse. And I don't regret the journey, because I think it's a big part of who I am, and I learned a lot about myself. But it didn't work. It didn't work in terms of solving the problem. And I was slowly inching up, and my top was probably about 280 pounds. And the doctors were telling me I was going to die soon because my triglycerides were through the roof, and they hadn't seen them that high in such a young person. And I had rosacea and psoriasis and eczema and all these autoimmune problems. And I'll try to speed it up. There were 3 things that happened that really caused me to shift the paradigm from a love yourself thin paradigm to a alpha wolf, like take charge of the pack kind of paradigm. The first one was that because my ex-wife was traveling for business a lot, I didn't have children, and I also didn't commute. I worked at home. So I had a lot of time in my hands, and I developed a second career. And I was consulting for big food and big pharma, essentially. Companies that I kind of wish I wasn't consulting for. Looking in retrospect, I feel like the Marlboro man at the end of his life, where he kind of got contrite and said I shouldn't have been teaching people how to smoke cigarettes. But I was a hidden persuader, helping people to sell sugar and big drugs, and it wasn't all bad, but a lot of it was bad. And what I saw there is more important. What I saw was that they were engineering these hyper palatable substances, billions of dollars being poured into, I think billions, at least hundreds of millions, to create these food-like substances. There are combinations of like starch and sugar and oils and excitotoxins and salts, and it was all geared at the lizard brain, at the reptilian brain, trying to hit the bliss point without giving us enough nutrition to feel satisfied. Like, they're really creating addiction. And they didn't think of themselves like that. They thought of themselves as creating really fun products, and this was their mission. But that's really what they were doing. And then the big advertising companies were spending a similar amount of money to convince us that these things were healthy and necessary. I remember working with a big food bar manufacturer who told me, the VP told me, that the most profitable thing that they did was to take the vitamins out of the bar, because when they took the vitamins out of the bar, it tasted better and it was less expensive, and they could put the money into the packaging instead. And then they right? And they made the packaging multicolored and vibrant and diverse. And in nature, when you see a vibrance of diverse colored nutritious things, it should be signaling a diversity of micronutrients that are available. That's why they say when you have your salad, you should eat the rainbow. Mm-hmm. Red tomatoes and dark green lettuce and blueberries and, et cetera, yellow carrots. You're getting a diversity of micronutrients. But here, the company was faking us out. And so the bottom line is, I saw that these two things were the big food industry and the big advertising industry were very powerful forces, and it had nothing to do with the fact that I was in a bad marriage or my mama didn't love me enough or I had a hole in my heart. It's just this stuff is powerful stuff. They're hitting our evolutionary buttons, and they're hijacking our survival drive. And every time we're looking for love at the bottom of a bag or a box or a container, there's some fat cat in a white suit with a mustache that's laughing all the way to the bank, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, those two things have nothing to do with this psychological approach that I'm taking. Remember, I'd been trying this for like 20 years, and it just kept on getting worse. At the same time, I studied neurology a little bit, and I recognized that the survival drive in the brain, the feast and famine response, the fight or flee response that was being triggered in the food addiction, it doesn't know love. This is the reptilian brain. So think of the brainstem. This is the reptilian brain, and when it looks at something in the environment, it's like a bad college drinking game. It says, do I eat it, do I mate with it, or do I kill it? It's very, very primitive. There's no love there. It's the limbic system and the mammalian brain, and then eventually the neocortex that says, wait a minute, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact does this have on the people that you love? What impact does this have on the person you're trying to be in the world? What impact does this have on your long-term goals like diet and fitness and weight loss? And so at this point, I did something really weird. And I was not trying to be famous. I was not going to publish it. It was just, I had to figure out food for myself. And so I said to myself, Glenn, what if you gave this inner lizard brain a name? And I should have called it something different, but I called it my inner pig. I decided that my lizard brain was my inner pig. I'm very embarrassed. I'm a sophisticated psychologist, but I called it my inner pig. And I decided that I needed to have very clear lines in the sand to distinguish healthy from unhealthy eating if I was going to wake up and figure out when the reptilian brain was active. So I started with very clear rules, like one of my first rules was I will never have chocolate on a weekday again. And that way, if I heard a little voice in my head when I was standing at Starbucks and there was a big hairy chocolate bar on the counter, and the little voice was saying, you know what, Glenn, I know it's a Wednesday, but come on, you worked out hard enough and you're not going to gain any weight. Go ahead, have the chocolate. You can just start again tomorrow. It's just as easy. I'd say, whoa, that's not me. That's my inner pig, and it's squealing for pig slop. Chocolate on a Wednesday is pig slop. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. As ridiculous as that sounds, so this is very private. It was just going on in my head. It would wake me up at the moment of impulse and give me those extra microseconds to make the right decision. I didn't always make the right decision. It wasn't a miracle. But what was miraculous was all of this mishagash, all of this, it's a Jewish word for a lot of BS, basically. All of this mythology about, well, my mama didn't love me enough, and there's some chronic progressive mysterious disease inside of me, and I can't control myself, and I have to admit that I'm powerless. And all of these things that I'd been taught kind of cleared away, and I said, wait a minute, no, that's just my reptilian brain. It's waking up and perceiving this erroneously as an emergency. I don't have to do this. From that point, I did a lot of experimenting, and I developed the system over time. I experimented with different kinds of rules, and I discovered that it was very important to create rules that were a low bar that you could and would do. I found that most people who were struggling with overeating were also very good dieters. It's kind of like the old nursery rhyme, when she was good, she was very, very good, but when she was bad, she was horrid. And so they're on this feast and famine regimen. They're dieting and restricting, but bodybuilders are the worst for this, by the way. And then, as soon as the contest is over, they're got the two pizzas, and there was some version of that always going on for me. So I discovered I had to come up with really simple, easy rules, and I would put weight loss aside for the moment, and I would just focus on, I want to be the master. I want to be the alpha wolf. And by the way, when an alpha wolf is challenged for leadership, what it doesn't do is say, oh my goodness, someone needs a hug. It growls and it snarls and it says, get back in line or I'll kill you, right? So this became a ruthless game of domination rather than self-love. And I would experiment with those rules, and I taught myself how to deactivate the emergency response system. Like all of the industrial foods and the hyper palatable substances we were eating, they're all designed to stimulate that, oh my God, you have to eat that right now. It's a survival drive. That's why we have sayings like just hand over the chocolate or nobody gets hurt, because it really does feel like all rationality goes aside. So I discovered that if I took a deep breath and I let it out for longer than it took me to breathe it in. I call them 7-11 breaths from Laurie Hammond now. But if you breathe in for a count of 7 and you breathe out for a count of 11, what you're doing is you're signaling your brain that there's no emergency. Because think about it, if you were in the wild and there was a hungry bear chasing you, you wouldn't have time to breathe out long. You'd be trying to get all the oxygen you could as quickly as you could. So this is the opposite. This says, it's okay, there's no hungry bear, it's time to rest and digest. So I take a couple of deep breaths, and then I'd say, well, what is my pig saying? Why does my pig want me to break the rule? And it would say something like, well, Glenn, it's just as easy to start tomorrow, and you worked out hard enough today. Then I would take another deep breath, and I'd say, why is my pig wrong? I know there's some half-truth in there, but why is it wrong? And as I would research these things and try to reason them out, I realized that, first of all, it's never just as easy to start tomorrow, because the way that the brain works by the principle of neuroplasticity, if two things co-occur, if you have a craving and you reinforce that craving with chocolate, you're going to make the craving stronger tomorrow. Similarly, if you have a thought, like I might as well just start tomorrow, and then you eat chocolate and get a dopaminergic pleasure response from that, you're more likely to have the same thought tomorrow. So you're more likely to say, I will start tomorrow. So the truth is, you can only ever use the present moment to be healthy. If you're in a hole, stop digging. So this is the nature of what I would do. I kept a journal for 8 years, and I wrote down all the crazy things my pig would say, and then I figured out why it was wrong. And slowly but surely, that greased chute that seemed to go from stimulus to response, from the chocolate bar to me eating 12 of them, it seemed like that grease chute had sandpaper on it, and it wasn't as easy to go down that road. And then I would learn how to actually feed myself. So I discovered that it wasn't just about avoiding the chocolate, but what do I physiologically need? Is there some authentic need underneath? Often I found I needed some type of green smoothie, like some bananas and kale or bananas and celery. It wasn't always a physiological need. Sometimes it was an emotional need, but largely I found that I would have the worst cravings when I had not, for example, if I had a really good workout, but I didn't have any kind of recovery drink in the first hour, then I would get those cravings. So when I started planning more for how I wanted to recover, then I wouldn't have the cravings as strongly, and I wouldn't have to rely on these techniques as much. So it just kind of all came together. And then after keeping a journal for 8 years, when I was getting divorced, I was a minor part of a publishing company, and the CEO called me. He said, Glenn, we need to write our own book because we want to do some marketing experiments, and we want to be able to attract better authors, but they won't let us do this. And I said, okay, well, I've got this journal that I kept for 8 years about me versus my inner pig, see? And he says, I love it. Turn it into a book. Send it to me. So I took that summer. I sent it to him. A few weeks later, he calls me back and he says, Glenn, donuts or pig slop? I don't eat donuts. I don't live for animals. Tell me what to do. And he proceeded to lose 100 pounds.
Whoa.
Not right away, but, like 5-10 pounds a month. And
Nice.
And the rest is history. Now we have 1 million readers, and I've written 6 more books. And people don't quite recognize my name, but sometimes they'll see me at a bookstore, and this is really great on a first date, by the way. They'll come and point at me and go, pig guy. So now I'm the pig guy. After a long and illustrious career as a psychologist, I'm the pig guy. That's what I do.
It's what the people needed. It's so catchy. Come on.
No, I think the fact that it's kind of shocking, And I also think that we need something aggressive at the moment of impulse because we don't have access to our rationality at that moment. So being able to catch the impulse and wake up with something aggressive, I think that really works. And I think the juxtaposition of, the idea that I've got all these credentials and I tried everything, and then what really worked was this crazy primitive thing. I think that did make it popular. So
yeah, it seems like an ongoing theme, that like alpha versus love yourself kind of thing. It's interesting. It's different than a lot of what we may have heard from other people on this podcast, where it's like, it's going to be hard, and you need to put some work into it versus just be all hugging yourself every day and accepting.
And the work is front loaded, though. See, the pig will tell you that you shouldn't do this because it's going to last forever and you don't have the time to do this work. But it's more like getting an airplane into the air. It takes most of the fuel to get it to cruising altitude, and then you can cruise to your destination. Or it's maybe kind of like learning the rules of the road. When you're learning how to drive, there are a couple of months you really have to study, and you got to practice, and you need someone to take you out and supervise you. But once you've got them, then you can daydream and kind of drift and make phone calls and listen to music while you're driving, and you stop at the red light and you yield at the yield sign, and you're not supposed to beep at the cops, and you'll be okay.
Yes, I love this theme too. You mentioned greased chute earlier. It makes me think of like even working out, right? When you're first starting, it's hard and you have to get through it. Or even habit creation, it's all front loaded. It's writing a program and then you just let the program run once you get to that point. But there's so many people that can't get to that point without help of a wonderful podcast like this.
Well, no, and then it starts to feel like there's something wrong if you don't work out.
Like exactly. Yeah. It's the reverse. Yeah,
exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of some rules that you've either implemented or prescribed to people? Because you touched on it a little bit, but we've talked about it a lot, decision fatigue and that moment of, I could just do this one and that. But it's such an important thing because you're in those positions where you don't want to think about it and you don't want to choose to be the healthiest person you can possibly be every single time. You have to make every decision about everything.
Yes.
But if you're like, there's a thing, I'm not doing that.
Let me talk about the use of rules in general and why character trumps willpower. Right? So you've talked about decision fatigue, and there's a lot of research that indicates that people have trouble resisting indulgent foods the more decisions they have to make during the day. Not just food decisions, by the way. If I make you do math problems, you're going to have a harder time resisting marshmallows. Seriously.
It seems oddly specific.
Well, let's just say there was someone who did a little experiment. Yeah. No, there were some studies very specifically with marshmallows. So it's easier if you can eliminate as many decisions as possible. And this is where a lot of the conventional advice in our culture goes wrong, because we're told to eat well 90% of the time and indulge 10% of the time. And that's basically good advice in theory. It's like a good North Star to point to. But the problem is it doesn't tell you which is the 90% and which is the 10%. And so every time you're in front of a chocolate bar, you have to make another food decision. Wears down your willpower, wears down your willpower, wears down your willpower. Whereas if I say, I'll only ever have chocolate on the last 3 days of the calendar month, I've still eliminated chocolate 90% of the time, but now I don't have to make decisions for most of the month. Now you can take this a step further. Eventually what it becomes is, I'm just the kind of person who doesn't eat chocolate most of the month. Or I've decided to become the kind of person who doesn't eat, and maybe you'll decide you're just the kind of person that doesn't eat chocolate. And then eventually you don't even need the rule because it's just part of your character. See, we're wired to develop character traits that are kind of written into our programming without even knowing it. So if you go into a diner and the waitress sits you at the front of the table at the front of the restaurant, but there are no video cameras and almost nobody is there, and she left the $10 tip on the table and she hasn't seen it yet, most people would say they would never take that. They just reflexively would say, no, I wouldn't take that. That's not mine. I'd say, well, why? They'll say, well, I'm not a thief. I never steal, right? So you have developed a rule for what you habitually do at the moment of temptation. It's an unwritten rule that's just become part of your character. And then you realize that we have all sorts of rules unwritten into our character like this. I never kick a policeman in the tush. I don't push old ladies over cliffs. Right? I don't go number 2 in my mother-in-law's living room.
Mm-hmm. These also experiments, by the way, that we.
Well, there's a reason I'm divorced now, right? So, but you know what I mean? Character trumps willpower. So this methodology, it seems on its surface to be something like, I don't know, like you're trying to install Nazi food policemen in your head or something. Mm-hmm. But really what you're doing is defining a really clear bullseye for the kind of person you want to become. What role do you want chocolate to play in your life? And you can make rules about, you asked me now what type of rules. There are what I call nevers and always, things where you are completely eliminating or completely including something in your life, like I will never have chocolate again, or I will never eat more than 5 servings of cake per calendar week. You do it whatever you want to. Or you can make them conditional. You can say, I will only ever have chocolate in a restaurant's dessert, but no more than twice per calendar month, and only when I'm with my husband. So the limit is really your imagination, how you want to do it. And there are all sorts of rules that we found are helpful. Some people don't like rules that eliminate anything at all or regulate their food at all. They just want rules to support mindfulness. So that could be something like, I'll always put my fork down between bites. I will never eat in front of a screen again. Mm-hmm. Then we like to start people with one simple rule. Because remember, what your pig wants to do is set the bar too high for you to sustain it, so that you'll crash and binge and overeat again. So what we want to do is set the bar low and prove that we're the master, not the slave. And I remember this guy, truck driver, who had to eat at fast food restaurants 3 times a day, ate at truck stops all the time. And he says, I'm not going to stop doing that, but I'll tell you what, I'll stop going back for seconds. And with that one simple rule, he kind of took a step over the edge and he tilted the scales from allowing his pig to win, which really just means that he was eating impulsively, emotionally, spontaneously, to having more intellectual control and using his head to decide what he was going to do. And see, once people recognize that that's possible to do one simple thing, then they get excited. It's like they've recovered their spirit and they no longer feel powerless and confused and like the whole thing is a big mystery. And then they want to do more. So a lot of my work is usually slowing people down and saying, okay, forget all these diets unless your doctor says it's an emergency. And I'm not a medical doctor, by the way, so I can't prescribe or I can't override what your doctor says. But unless your doctor says it's an emergency, let's take a couple of weeks and just prove you can follow any old rule. And they feel like it's a miracle when I get them to do that. And then we take a look and say, okay, now how do we swap out some, low nutrient density, highly caloric kind of junk foods for something that's a little more, nutritious and wholesome. And we work with people on just about any dietary philosophy, by the way. I mean, I personally am a plant-based person, but I work with all sorts of low carb. And why are you smiling, Allie? Does that surprise you?
I'm going plant-based in like 2 days.
Oh, you
we
are?
Need to dive into that.
Okay.
we have plenty more to talk.
Are you going to try to eat a whole cow between now and then? Or?
Yes. Brazilian barbecue.
Well, good for you.
Thanks.
Good for you. So there are a wide variety of rules. Some people will take a picture of their food before they eat it. And that just introduces an element of mindfulness. Some people will say, I can eat whatever I want to as long as I write it down first. So they have to, before they go into the restaurant or before they order, they write out exactly what they're going to have, and then they stick to exactly what they said. It's really a matter of moving things from anything that's trouble for you, move it from the spontaneous to the intellectually planned, without getting carried away. It's possible to get too restrictive with the rules and, build yourself a box that's really hard to get out of. Simple rules, steady work at it. And tell me if I'm talking too much if you want to ask something else, because there's another big piece of it that's kind of important.
Go. Okay. We're so ready.
So the other big piece of it is what I call committing with perfection, but forgiving yourself with dignity. Mostly we're told to do the opposite. Mostly we're told progress, not perfection, right? The problem with that is that there's an energy in perfectionism that winners harness to accomplish goals. So when you talk to a competitive cyclist, they are visualizing themselves crossing the finish line. They're not thinking, maybe I will get there, maybe I won't. I'll just do the best I can, right? When you talk to an Olympic archer, before they loose the arrow, they visualize the arrow going dead center into the bullseye. It's almost like they're one with the bullseye. That commitment with perfection, it's what empowers them to purge their mind of the doubt and insecurity that normally would drain their energy from accomplishing the goal. Now, if that archer misses the target, it's like a little outside the bullseye, they don't scream F-U-C-K and then say, I'm a pathetic archer. I might as well throw all the other arrows up in the air or just shoot them into the audience. They say no. They didn't tell you I was a character, right? But by how much did I miss the bullseye? In what direction? And what adjustments do I need to make it more likely that I will do it again? They forgive themselves. They take it seriously. Like, if you touch a hot stove by mistake, you take that seriously, but you don't say I'm a pathetic hot stove toucher and put your whole hand down on the stove. Mm-hmm. You pay attention, you learn, and you stand up and aim again. If you do that, you have to get better, because we are neurological learning machines. It's your birthright. You are built with the machinery to get better and better and better. The reason that people get stuck is that they're told, progress, not perfection. Don't use this energy of perfectionism. And then, of course, when they make a mistake, then they bring perfectionism into play and they say, I'm not going to forgive myself with dignity. I'm really pathetic. This is awful. I might as well just binge all day until, it's a new day tomorrow, or worse. And it turns out that voice of self-castigation we all hear after making a mistake it's reptilian brain generated. It's trying to make you feel too weak to resist the next binge. Because if you think about it, there's no point in getting stuck perseverating on the idea that I'm a pathetic hot stove toucher or I'm an awful archer. You need the pain for a moment. So if you didn't feel the pain of touching a hot stove, then you wouldn't know what was there. And there are disorders that children are born with where they can't feel pain and they don't stay alive very long because they don't know where the sharp edges are. But when you have that pain function physiologically, it gets your attention and you can make adjustments and learn. Similarly, you don't want to get rid of all guilt or shame for making a mistake, because that's what gets your attention. By the same token, once it has your attention and you're doing something about it, then you need to let it go. Right? So that's why I say commit with perfection, but forgive yourself with dignity.
Oh, yeah. Love it.
Good.
And I like that too, especially because I feel like a lot of times people get sort of, they stop before they start. What would you say to someone who does that? Or they say like, oh, well, this isn't the most optimized way I could be doing something. This isn't the most perfect way I could be doing something. So I guess I shouldn't even, that stops a lot of people before they start. And by people, I mean me.
It's a manifestation of a bifurcated mindset. It's like, if I'm not perfect, then I'm nothing. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, none of us are perfect. We all have to start somewhere.
Okay.
And are you perfect? Is
I
that?
mean,
I mean, look at her. So,
yeah.
All 4'11" of her.
Hey,
are you 4'11"?
I'm perfectly short. No, I'm like 5'2". Shut up.
Okay. I once was in a whole study about the power of petite women, and how they're forced to develop a personality that really, and a presence that really speaks for itself. So,
Chihuahuas are really barky. So,
but they have a way about them. They got a way of exerting their power, as we all do. Now I forgot the question because we're obsessed with Ali's shortness.
Perfectionism, stopping, not even trying because you can't do it a perfect way.
Yeah, the bifurcated belief. Yeah.
And it's I mean, you could think of some silly examples. But do either of you have kids? No. Well, if you did have kids, at some point they would be learning how to walk, and you would never say to them, you know what, you're probably going to fall down a whole bunch of times, so you might as well not even try. You're going to be a crawler. That's just how it is, right? You got to wait until you stand up and walk perfectly. But of course not. Developmentally, we know that there's a learning process that we have to go through. And the real piercing insight for all of this is that there's a secondary gain for not starting. See, so for example, if you were reluctant to adopt a rule I don't know if you're a binge eater or if you're struggling with anything, but if you're reluctant to adopt a rule because you weren't going to get it perfect, that would empower you to keep binging. So you need to recognize that there's a secondary gain to not starting. And it would be better to make a conscious choice. First of all, to say, no one's going to tell me what rule to adopt besides me. So if I want to have nothing but chocolate all day long for a week and have one healthy meal and that's my whole rule, I can do that if I want to. So I don't have to give up anything I don't want to give up. I don't have to I don't have to go on this person's diet or that person's diet. I can make this for myself because I know what eating healthy is at this point in my life, right? So there is no longer that reason for procrastinating. You tell yourself you're not going to feel unreasonably guilty because even though we have to paint a perfect bullseye and present that bullseye to our pigs as if they are set in stone, the truth is that we know that we can change the bullseye whenever we want to. We just do it with forethought and consideration and a couple of days delay so that it's not done impulsively because the pig is not working on it. So you're not going to get boxed into anything. There's really no reason to put it off. There's no reason to put it off. And I can usually get people started when I explain that to them.
Yeah, especially the low bar thing too, right? We talk a lot about how right now you're the perfect episode for starting in January because everyone's gonna change their diet and go vegan. How annoying! And add a new workout plan and try and get more sleep, and then do breath work 10 days a week, whatever. And so just being able to say, okay, I'm going to do this one thing, take control with that, and then use that to sort of build and empower from there, I think is really helpful.
I mean, you guys probably do something like that when you start people working out, right? Because you don't want to exhaust them or make them miserable the first time, so they're scared to come back. You want them to feel like they got a little bit of a workout, they started a routine, they had a pleasant experience. It's better than they would have done on their own. But you're not going to totally kick their ass so that they never come back to see you.
Right, exactly.
I'm kind of the same way as a food trainer.
Well, and you talk about the different types of rules. Have you found more success with the more lenient ones that say, okay, maybe the weekends you can have chocolate versus just none at all? Or is it like a personality type that really needs to just cut it all off and that works better?
I find 2 out of 3 people are moderators. 1 out of 3 is an abstainer. And it varies from substance to substance. So I don't have chocolate at all. I tried 6 ways to Sunday to figure out how I could have it on the weekends, have it when my only if my sister's cousin's parakeet died. I mean, every way I could think of, I wanted to have chocolate, and I just couldn't figure it out. So I
keep gifting her parakeets.
Yes.
Get that arrow out.
That's funny. So, I have to be an abstainer when it comes to chocolate. When it comes to flour, I could plan out a plant-based pizza if I really want to. And maybe twice a year I will do that, and I'll say I'm going to have it on this and this date and this many slices, and I work out a little more beforehand, and I do okay with that. I'm usually not happy afterwards. Because my system has gotten really clean, and so but every now and then I'll have the craving, and I can do that. I find the numbers are about 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 people for sugar, flour, alcohol. They're able to moderate. 1 out of 3 really needs to quit. Also, also like cheese and nuts can be addictive substances. Okay, can you guess what the absolute most addictive substance is in the research? Food-wise?
Methamphetamine.
No. It's a very similar pathway neurologically, but no, that's not it. Food-wise, what's the most addictive food?
Processed
creme brulee.
Creme brulee.
It's pizza.
Pizza.
Oh, really?
Pizza. It's like 3 times more addictive than chocolate.
Wow.
Yeah, we found 28% of the people that we did a national survey with could not stop eating pizza when they started, versus only 11% with chocolate.
Interesting. Well, you have that one slice, and all you're doing is thinking about the second slice, and 2 is not enough. So then you have 3, and then you feel like crap.
It's fat and sugar and salt. So it's all together.
Perfect.
Starch.
Yeah, it's crazy because you were talking about these hyperpalatable substances. Do you really think they don't know? And you called them not evil. And food companies, advertising companies, they just think they're making good, fun things.
I think we need a lot more regulation. I think we need I don't think it's going to... I don't think they're going to wake up and of their own morality and own free will say, we're going to stop making this stuff, because the consumer wants to be lied to, unfortunately. The consumer, they're not really looking for healthy foods, they're looking for plausible deniability. So these potato chips are made with avocado oil, therefore they're healthy. You don't have to worry about the acrylamides made in the roasting process, or the fact that it's 10 times as calorically dense as anything you'll find in nature, or that every study ever done on oil that is processed in this way says it's carcinogenic. These are avocado oil. This is avocado oil. Damn it! And you've got a free pass. That's what the consumer is really looking for, and it's very difficult when they're put in an economic position to have to serve the consumer like that, and that's what they're going to buy. It's getting better over time with more studies coming out, and the organic movement going forward, and people really knowing more and more what's going on. But you also have to remember that we live in a world where there are a lot of food deserts. So it's one thing to tell people that I was having a conversation with a woman who was an executive director of a group of food banks in, I think it was California. And I said, well, 78% of the people who are either dying or hospitalized from COVID are obese. Shouldn't we be promoting this? Shouldn't we be promoting fitness as a, cure for COVID? And she said, well, you can't tell people that because, 15% of the population doesn't have enough money to buy fruits and vegetables. A lot of them don't have cars to go get fruits and vegetables. We really need to have some type of a broader scale access. So I don't think the moral issues are as cut and dry as they were. I deeply regret having worked in the areas that I worked. I feel like it was not a moral choice to choose that way of life during the period that I did that. But a lot of the people I met I wouldn't characterize them as evil. I wouldn't. They're in a certain economic situation and they hadn't been educated enough, and
Yeah, they're clocking in.
I mean, my one of my best friends from high school worked for a really big company, a really big food company, and he chose not to after a while when he really saw what was going on. So I feel like it would be good to wake people up. It would be good for there to be more education. I hope I don't get sued in the process of doing it. But I don't know if I'd characterize them as evil. Like,
well, but maybe the machine or the greater engine is evil. Who knows? But I think it's funny too, because a lot of us, me and Allie, have talked about this all the time, where we have these. We've caught it a couple of times. We had a couple episodes ago. We were talking about one of those protein cookies, and we compared it to a McDonald's cheeseburger. And because the label on the fitness cookie said protein on the front, we knee-jerk reaction thought it was healthy, and when you go through it line by line, it's incredibly unhealthy.
Right.
So it is sort of validating, I guess, to have somebody from the inside sort of say, yeah, a lot of it's marketing, a lot of it's sort of a tactic. What's the flashy colors or the cheaper price point or whatever.
I mean, look, we didn't have chips and pastas and pretzels and pizzas on the savannah. We just didn't. And so we've had maybe 500 years to evolve to get used to them, and it's a blip on the evolutionary scale. We can't possibly be set up to have those things be good for us yet. And that'll take 500,000 years. So,
but it is interesting the way you're framing it. I haven't thought about it like this before. It's not that I'm being lied to, it's that I want to be lied to. I want to eat that cookie and feel like it was fine. And it's not just we're all sitting ducks being told this garbage. We're really buying into it because we want to.
And you can opt out. And one of the things that I tell people is you do a lot more damage by lying to yourself and pretending that something is healthy when it's unhealthy than if you just say, this is unhealthy and I'm going to eat it. I would fight for your right to do that. We fought wars for our freedoms in this country. I believe we all live on somewhere in the continuum between, what's the Hell's Angels motto? Live fast and die young, versus live slow and enjoy the ride. Everybody has to choose where they want to live in that continuum. And if all you do is optimize for your health, then that's all you're going to have. So I am fully in favor of making indulgent choices from time to time, as long as you can handle them, right? And so if that means that, I'm gonna won't be able to hike the tallest mountain when I'm 98, I'll have to stop when I'm 97. That's okay. I'll have that piece of vegan pizza, and I'll be okay with that.
Well, you talk a lot about the quality of the food. Do you ever work with people that have trouble with quantity? This is a self-serving question because I'll have walnuts. Those are great for you, but I'll eat the entire bag. I'm definitely more for eating too much versus, wanting Doritos.
Yeah. Most overeaters struggle with quantity in some shape or form. We're told to eat when we're hungry and stop when we're full, which is possible if you can be mindful all the time. And it's also possible in a world where your hungry and full meters aren't broken by industry. But the foods that they're giving you are so they're so hyper engineered to keep you eating that it's foolhardy to believe that you really know when you're full if you're including those kinds of foods in your diet. For example, one of my clients worked for the food industry also. I didn't learn this in my time, but I learned it from him. And he talked about how they made like corn chips and their various famous brands of corn chips. Do you know that it's not one assembly line with the same formula going through the whole assembly line, but it's more like 5 or 6 assembly lines with very slight variations in flavor, because the brain has evolved to seek variety in order to find a variety of micronutrients. right? And so you will keep eating if the next chip tastes just a little bit different. It's all that kind of research. It's all that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's true. Like at a Super Bowl party, when you have a bunch, you're definitely going to eat more. Actually, I've heard that you'll eat more M&Ms if they're all different colors, even though they taste the same.
Same kind of thing. Yeah.
If they were all red, you would eat less than if they were multicolored.
Mm-hmm.
That's nutso.
Mm-hmm. So your hungry and full meters are likely broken. And what I tell people is that for about 6 months, in order to calm down your nervous system with regards to this, these supersized stimuli, you're going to need some type of objective controls, objective measurable controls. And over time, you can relinquish them and rely more on your sense of being hungry and full. Over time, you can just have a more mindful eating approach. But the other thing is, we don't live in a world where you can be mindful all the time. I mean, we didn't evolve with like emails and social media, and look at the number of scene changes on television, look at the car chases and explosions and naked people that are running around. We didn't live with all this need for attention, for constant shifting of attention. And so how can you be mindful all the time? It's, in my estimation, it's better to assess the danger points in your personal food economy and then make a plan for an objective plan for dealing with all that. Some of it you let go of it, some of it you'll keep for life, but all of it you're able to take control over. It's not anywhere near as hard as people are led to believe, or which they really feel from how beaten down they've been. We get a 90% reduction in binge frequency in 1 month when we work with people directly, and it drops down a little bit after 6 months. But it's very, very effective, very, very possible to do this, and worthwhile to take charge of your own food destiny.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's one more thing I want to tell you about do I have time to tell you one more thing?
Of course.
Please.
Okay.
Come on.
There's a phenomenon called downregulation. What that means is that when you're exposed to a supersized stimulus, like when I was in graduate school and I had to sleep underneath the subway, the first few weeks that you're exposed to it, you pay an awful lot of attention to it. It impinges upon your nervous system.
Is this a Subway sandwich shop or a Subway?
Like, a Subway. A real Subway. A real Subway.
Okay, it wasn't sure.
The same thing for a Subway sandwich shop, I suppose. But it was a real Subway, and it was extremely loud, and I couldn't sleep the first couple of weeks. But after a few weeks, I didn't hear it anymore. What happened? My brain downsized its response to that supersized stimulus. It said, okay, I thought that was really relevant, but it's not so relevant anymore. Well, the same thing happens with our pleasure system. So when you have a bag of M&Ms every day, at first it's unbelievably amazing. And then the second bag isn't quite so good. And the third big bag isn't quite as good as that, because your taste buds and your dopaminergic response system is down regulating in response to a supersized stimulus. Now, when you continue on that pattern, eventually you lose the ability to enjoy the tastes that natural foods have to offer. So everybody says, I don't like fruit and vegetables. How am I ever going to lose weight? I'm stuck. No, you're stuck because you're eating all this hyper-palatable food that makes you not like fruit and vegetables. There's also a phenomenon called upregulation, which means that when you stop overstimulating yourself day after day after day, your taste buds will double in sensitivity in 6 to 8 weeks, and it's very It's very restorable. It's very restorable. So you have to get through that initial period where, by the way, in the extreme, it's not only the taste apparatus that fails to respond to pleasure, but after a while, your entire system doesn't give you pleasure. It's like the M&Ms have robbed your happiness. And without the M&Ms, you feel like life is just not normal. It's bland. It's psychological term for it would be anhedonia, the inability to experience pleasure. And people are terrified of that, and they don't understand that there's another side. And the only way out is through. You got to go through. But I promise that on the other side, it's bliss. So
And
that's what I wanted to tell you. Yeah.
Did you say 6 to 8 weeks? Ballpark?
The research that I heard about your taste buds was that if you stop hyperstimulating them, they double in sensitivity in 6 to 8 weeks. I got that from Dr. Furman, Fuhrman.
I mean, anecdotally, do you feel like you appreciate food more than?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
Oh God, I get so excited in the produce section. I'm a real freak. I'm a fruit and vegetable freak, and yeah, you know what? I don't have the most fanatically healthy diet, but I do largely live on, fruit and vegetables and nuts and seeds, and there's so many. I mean, the difference in taste between a Fuji apple and a delicious apple and a Gala apple, I never would have known before. But now I really know that I'm a delicious apple person. That's my favorite kind of apple. And you don't have to believe me. This sounds really like some nerdy old guy talking, but I'm a big old fruit nerd. But you don't have to believe me. You just have to try it. You got to try it. It'll come to fruition over time.
Like that. Yeah. Don't listen to us. Just figure it out for yourself.
Do a 30-day experiment without sugar. See what happens.
I'm a big fan.
Well, that's important because I think a lot of people are like, yeah, I mean, I'll try it, but I just, I don't know. I can't, who knows? Like I can't, and like, they don't know how long they have to hang on for. Does that make sense?
Or how easy it'll be once you get past that first part.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and also a lot of people never go 100 hours. And if you go 100 hours without sugar and you eat things that are a little lower glycemic and you eat consistently and flood your body with nutrition, after 100 hours, you feel like a totally different person because your blood sugar stabilizes, right? Mm-hmm. And you're not feeling the craving, because what happens with sugar is we get this 18-minute high followed by a crash unless you have more sugar. And so people are always trying to fend off that next crash and go through 100 hours and see what happens.
Interesting.
So might just be 100 hours from freedom.
Do you believe in fasting?
I believe in I'm very good friends with Melanie Avalon, who's the host of the Intermittent Fasting podcast. And I can get her for you if you're curious about interviewing her. But we kind of work this all out. I believe that there are very strong medical benefits to fasting. I also believe it's very bad for binge eaters, people who really feel like they're overeating beyond their own judgment all the time and they can't control themselves. I believe in the first 4 to 6 months, it's not a great idea because you're wanting to really stabilize your blood sugar, and especially if you've been binge eating. If you're having a lot of flour and alcohol and sugar and salt in your system. What Melanie says is that it takes longer for those people to get fat adapted, for their blood sugar to stabilize in a fast, and that's why they have trouble. So I find that I have a much lower success rate with people who are insisting on intermittent fasting or regular fasting in the beginning. But if they'll hang in there with me for 4 to 6 months, then we can get them there and they can make use of fasting. Personally, I don't use it, even though I believe in it, because I am too happy not having the cravings and not having to deal with. I mean, it was awful for me. I mean, my whole life was just about, when's the next pizza? I make jokes about it, but it was like not being alive. It was horrible. So the freedom that I feel on the other side of this, and the fact that I discovered, how to do it, and I can do it eating healthy, unless I have to have a colonoscopy or something, I don't fast.
Have you run into anybody, or have you experienced at all sort of physical responses, headaches or fatigue or stuff like that when people are changing their diet?
Yeah. I mean, I think detox is a real thing. I think, first of all, you get used to eating less calories, and secondly, you're not taking in all the stimulants. I mean, just look at chocolate, theobromine, caffeine, all these extra stimulants. So you're withdrawing that. I think there's a genuine phenomenon of detox. I think that if you, what I see is if people eat clean and they stay clean, after a week or so, they're not really complaining about that anymore for the most part. Mm-hmm. like I said, I'm not a medical doctor, but drink a lot of water, a lot of green leafy vegetables if it's okay for your diet, get you through that.
And we kind of touched on this a little bit, but thoughts on drinking? Do you drink yourself? Vegan alcohol?
I don't drink because I don't like it. 30 years ago, when actually 35, whenever I first went to college, longer than that, 38. Oh my God. I just realized that I didn't like it. I would have a couple of drinks and I'd be depressed for 3 days. And I wasn't addicted. I just didn't like it. And so I became a teetotaler. So I really haven't had a drink I had a sip at my graduation for my doctoral program, but I haven't had a drink forever. And it wasn't for health reasons. It was just because I didn't like the impact it had on my body. I will say, I find most women report to me that when they have more than one drink per day, that they have trouble following the rest of their rules. Because, it's a frontal lobe disinhibitor. So rule following is a function of the frontal lobe. So if you're going to take a drug that is going to disinhibit that, you might have some trouble.
Once the brain takes over.
Yeah. And a lot of people decide to stop alcohol once they start working with me. That's not my goal at all. I do tell them that there's a better methodology for alcohol. You don't want to use a never binge again methodology because there are a lot of differences between eating healthy and stopping drinking. Like stopping drinking is something you can do entirely, but you got to take the tiger out of the cage and feed it 3 times a day if you want to start eating healthy. And so there's a lot. My program is a lot softer than the programs that really work for alcohol. I'd recommend Rational Recovery if you want to stop drinking.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. You talk about how you don't like how it makes you feel, but you mentioned that even with pizza, right? It's interesting that you've eaten so clean for so long that the foods that you used to love and made you feel good now kind of make you feel crappy. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, and honestly, I've indulged my exercise addiction a little bit more as a positive addiction. I don't overdo it where my joints are hurting or anything like that, but an hour and a half a day, take a day off during the week. And I do that for my dopamine. I live on the beach, so I'm looking at the ocean right now. I pay a little more so I could do that. That's an indulgence. And I look for hugs and social contact and things that, are positive releases of dopamine as opposed to the junk.
Replace Doritos with hugs. That's what we learned today.
Hugs, man, not Doritos, hugs. So you're going to get me sued.
I said it, not him. Sue me.
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay.
Okay. So where can the Fitheads learn more?
Hey, Fitheads, if you'd like to learn more, I've got a couple of free things for you. What I want you to do is go to neverbingeagain.com and click the big red button so you can join the reader bonus list. It's called the reader bonus list, but what you actually get is a copy of the book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format for free. We'll show you where you can get it in paperback or Audible if you want, but there's a charge for that. So you get a copy for free. You will get a set of full-length recorded coaching sessions for free. The reason I do that is that I know you're thinking, why do Max and Allie have this weird-ass psychologist on who's got a pig inside of them? I know that it seems really harsh in the abstract, but the actual process of coaching someone through this is very compassionate. It takes people from feeling hopeless and despairing and like there's just nothing they can do to feeling hopeful and empowered. And it just takes one session to do that. So I want you to hear that. And we have a set of food plan starter templates. The program is diet agnostic. As long as you're getting enough nutrition, you can do it. So we came up with a set of rules that might work for, ketogenic versus high carb versus point counting versus calorie counting versus, plant-based. Whatever you're doing, there's probably an example for you. And then we have a couple of worksheets that will take you through modifying it for your own benefit. So at neverbingeagain.com, click the big red button. All of my social media is there also if you want to join us there. And neverbingeagain.com. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been enlightening.
Okay.
And thank you to the Fit Heads. If you can rate and review on Apple Podcasts, we appreciate that. And we will see you next week.